According to Kaspersky, the so-called equation group has been responsible for infecting upwards of tens of thousands of computers going back to at least 2001, perhaps as early as 1996. And they specifically targeted, through this group, computer networks in over 30 countries, including Russia, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Syria, and Mali.
Finding and rooting out terrorists before they strike has become the core of what every intelligence agency is seeking at the moment. Sometimes they break the rules to get this done, and sometimes they will claim it's necessary, for without such tools, they might never find the bad guys and gals in time. The National Security Agency will tell you that what a Russian cybersecurity firm has found is no big deal. Matter of fact, it's the cost of doing business. However, it will not sit well with plenty of people looking at their laptops and desktops today, wondering who exactly is watching. All right, let the expert fill in the blanks. He's assistant professor at Governor State University in Chicago, Illinois, and well-versed in fraud and identity theft. William Kresse joins us today. Professor, thanks for being here.
Great to be back with you again.
Is it not fair to say, Professor, that the NSA, when they read this story and found out that Kaspersky was making a big deal out of it, they would just say, come on, cost of doing business. We do this every day.
Well, I to some extent, probably, they, maybe they don't like the turf war that somebody's getting involved in their usual stunts. But to the NSA, their mission is really to going after, military intelligence and terror intelligence and things like that. Things that affect commerce really aren't within their bailiwick. So they're not that excited about it.
Well, that's exactly it. Let's look at what the reality of the situation is today, knowing full well that groups like ISIS and others are constantly using social media, Twitter. We have computers that are on 24/7, spilling out all sorts of terrorist activity and different information. Fair to say, though, that whether you're the NSA, whether you're the United Kingdom, France, or anybody else, if you want to catch the bad guys these days, you've got to be doing something like this. I know that people and the ACLU and other people are going to be really upset by this, but if you don't do it, you're going to be so far behind the times you may never catch the criminals.
Well, exactly. It's sort of like the old line that the bank robber used, that he robbed banks because that's where the money is. The terrorists and the cyber terrorists and the cyber fraudsters are all operating on the internet because that's where the money is, that's where the connections is, that's where we have to concentrate our abilities. Unfortunately, the federal government has spread out the responsibility over a number of agencies, and their response has been uncoordinated to date.
Is that the biggest issue that we're talking about here? And we've talked about the dysfunctionality of government in so many different ways, but the fact that we have not just the NSA, but the CIA, the FBI, other people, and Homeland Security, goodness knows what's involved there, that there's too many people doing this, nobody's bringing it together. And that is the real concern here, that it gets a little bit too far out of hand. You get one bad agency or one rogue agent doing something, and all of a sudden, you have really made a mess.
Well, you really have two things going on. You've got the possibility of the rogue agency, because there's nobody, or rogue agent, nobody having oversight over it. So oversight is important. But you also have a thing like the pre-9/11 situation where you had different agencies with different pieces of the puzzle, and had they been able to put it together, they might have figured it out in advance. I'm afraid we're going to get to a point, if we don't coordinate these activities, there's going to be a massive cyber attack, which we could be prepared for. But you've got the FBI had started with cyber crimes before 9/11. After 9/11, they got involved in terrorism, and it went over to the Secret Service, who had to, go up the learning curve. Then they got transferred from Treasury over to Homeland Security. The various agencies of our military involved, NSA's involved, CIA's involved. They really have to coordinate these things. Plus, as you say, we have to have the right oversight so we don't have our rights being impinged by those who are supposed to be protecting our liberties.
Ah, there you go. Let's go ahead and turn to that now, because according to Kaspersky, some of the implants from the NSA burrow so deep into the computer systems they infect the firmware. That's the embedded software that preps the computer's hardware before the operating system starts, and it's beyond the reach of any existing antivirus products and most security controls. In your opinion, knowing full well that this is where a lot of people are going to knee-jerk to right away, how concerned should the person watching us right now be, Joe Beer Can, if you will, sitting on the couch or watching in the office, that they're being watched by the NSA by this very same information?
I don't think Joe Beercan, as you put it, needs to be that concerned, because the NSA isn't really out to look at Joe Beercan, at least not now. And his computer may not be targeted. They're targeting suspected computers involved in suspected terrorist rings and things like that, and overseas activities. However, the potential is always there in the future, which is why I always call for having good, strong oversight for all these activities to ensure that we don't go too far, or that you have that rogue agent who can go too far.
Professor, despite the fact that we're doing something like this, and it is meant to go out and find the terrorists and find the bad guys before something happens, in your opinion, how far behind the curve are we, though? We seem to be doing this and trying to make up ground, and it seems to me as if we're always making up ground in cybersecurity these days.
You're always going to be in that situation, because just the numbers are against us. We see so many of these attacks coming out of Russia and the old Eastern Bloc, because they trained so many people in what we call here STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, that we've got hundreds of thousands of unemployed and underemployed people who have nothing better to do with their time but to try to attack American and Western computer systems. So we're always going to be behind the curve on this, and we're always going to be in a responsive nature because of it.
I got about 60 seconds left here. We also want to turn to the story of the cyber bank robbers stealing about $1 billion, according to Kaspersky.
Right.
I hate to say this again and use the cliche, but is this just the tip of the iceberg, and these guys really are just able to do this anytime, anywhere?
Well, now that we know about this particular fraud, we can respond to it, but then there will be a variant on it that we'll have to be able to respond to that, but that's exactly the case. This one was really brilliant in the way it was worked out. You got into the employees' computers at these banks, and then they would sit and watch what their employees would do, especially the ones who had the authority to transfer funds, the ones who were in charge of maintaining ATMs. And the part that I like the best, you know, in a strange way, is they could then order an ATM to dispense all of the cash in it. So you could send someone in the middle of the night to an ATM, and suddenly it's like you hit all sevens at a jackpot on a slot machine in Vegas, and would just spit out tens of thousands of dollars in cash.
We're going to get to the point real soon, Professor, where we're going to have to say, don't prosecute these guys, hire them. We're all out of time, Professor. Thank you so much, Professor William Kresse. We'll talk again soon, and MidPoint will continue.